Hello and welcome to New Central Studios. I'm Felicity Ezewike here with the stories making headlines beyond the continent. We begin with news in Asia, where Japan's new Prime Minister, Shigeru Ishiba, has on Tuesday promised political reform and help for households as prices rise, and says he would seek deeper ties with friendly nations to counter the gravest security threats his country has faced since World War II. Ishiba earlier unveiled his cabinet as he seeks to heal party divisions and secure a national mandate after calling an October 27 snap election. The 67-year-old former defense minister, who last week won a close-fought contest to lead the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, was confirmed earlier in the day as prime minister by parliament. The bodies of 23 people have been recovered after a bus transporting school children crashed and caught fire outside Bangkok. The bus was returning to the Thai capital after a school trip to the north of the country. The vast majority of victims are believed to be children, according to the country's transport minister. The bus was powered by extremely risky compressed natural gas. At least 3 people have been killed and 15 others injured after a man went on a stabbing spree inside a Walmart supermarket in Shanghai. Chinese police arrested the suspect, a 37-year-old man identified as Lin, at the scene. Authorities say Lin had come to Shanghai to vent his anger over a personal economic dispute. Investigations into the incident are ongoing. The attack occurred in a densely populated district in the city's southwest, home to several universities and a large shopping mall. Let's also tell you that in Europe, police officials have confirmed that 3 children have been injured in an attack at a daycare at a shopping center in the Swiss city of Zurich. The spokesperson for the city's police force said officers were notified of the attack in the Oerlikon area in the north of the city shortly after 12 p.m. local time. The man was arrested at the scene, and police said there is no ongoing threat to the public. Meanwhile, officers provided no motive for the attack, but said further information will be released later on Tuesday. Away from that, Russian General Andrei Medvedchuk says the army captured 12 localities in the direction of the Ukrainian town of Pokrovsk in September. He said this while reporting to Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov during an inspection of the Central Group of Forces. Medvedchuk says the liberated territory amounts to about 130 square kilometers. Still in Europe, on Tuesday, thousands of people demonstrated across France at the call of the CGT, FSU and Solidaires trade unions, demanding a better response from the government to social needs, just hours before the Prime Minister's highly anticipated policy statement. In Marseille, around 2,800 people marched, waving slogans like "Resist, refuse this Macronist world," and "Those who leave are those who fight," calling on the government to listen to the public, particularly regarding the repeal of the pension reform.
Augmenter les salaires et les pensions. Il faut de l'argent pour financer nos services publics, nos hôpitaux, nos écoles, nos universités, nos organismes de recherche. Et il faut abandonner définitivement la réforme de l'assurance chômage et abroger la réforme des retraites. Voilà nos fiscales. La justice fiscale, c'est d'abord de remettre à plat les cadeaux aux plus riches qui ont été consentis par Emmanuel Macron depuis le début de son septennat, 73 milliards chaque année. C'est ensuite évaluer les 200 milliards d'aides publiques aux entreprises qui sont consenties chaque année, c'est 1/3 du budget de l'État. Il faut les évaluer, les conditionner, les remettre à plat. Ça donne un levier considérable pour financer nos services publics et avoir des investissements de haut niveau au service de nos hôpitaux, nos écoles, nos universités, nos organismes de recherche, notre service public postal qui est menacé actuellement.
que ça prend, puisque finalement Michel Barnier s'inscrit dans la continuité de la politique au niveau économique, dans la continuité de Macron au niveau économique, et dans les pas du RN au niveau social, en termes de sécurité, en termes de politique de l'immigration. Et donc on a Emmanuel Macron, matinée de RN, aujourd'hui au gouvernement, et donc une politique qui dérive dangereusement vers un projet de société qui n'est pas du tout le nôtre, qui n'est pas du tout celui qui correspond à l'intérêt général, qui va cliver encore plus la société, qui va maintenir dans la pauvreté les jeunes, les précaires, les salariés.
Breaking news now. Iran has launched a barrage of missiles at Israel in response to the killing of senior Hezbollah and Hamas officials, sending Israelis rushing to bomb shelters and raising fears of all-out war in the region. Alarms sounded across Israel and explosions could be heard in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv after Israelis piled into bomb shelters late on Tuesday. Israeli military spokesperson Daniel Hagari said there were no reports of casualties from Tuesday's attack and that the army does not see any more threats in the airspace. He said in a video message that people in Israel were safe to leave shelters. Spanish Foreign Minister Jose Manuel Albares says that the spiral of violence in Lebanon must stop and urges Spanish citizens to leave the country. According to Albares, it is more necessary than ever to demand a ceasefire in Gaza and the unconditional release of all hostages. UN spokesperson in Geneva, Rolando Gomez, has given a brief update on peacekeepers stationed in Lebanon, saying they are regularly adjusting their posture and activities and have contingency plans to activate if necessary. The UN peacekeeping force in South Lebanon on Tuesday warned that any crossing into the country would breach its sovereignty after Israel announced it would carry out limited ground incursions.
Update, if you will. I just received something from our colleagues in the region, and just to mention that despite the dangerous development, peacekeepers, UNIFIL peacekeepers, that is, they remain in position. We are regularly adjusting our posture and activities, and we have contingency plans ready to activate if absolutely necessary. Peacekeeper safety and security is paramount, and all actors are reminded of their obligation to respect it.
Turkey President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Tuesday condemned Israel's ground operations in Lebanon and has urged the United Nations and other international organizations to stop Israel without wasting any more time. Erdogan told the Turkish parliament at the opening of the legislative year that whatever it does, Israel will be stopped sooner or later. He also adds that the terror and genocide Israel has carried out in Gaza has reached Lebanon and warned that if not stopped, the Israeli leadership would set its sights on Turkey.
Utanç verici bu tabloya rağmen bazı ülkeler İsrail'e destek vermeye, finansal veya askeri destek sağlamaya devam ediyor. Diğer bazı ülkelerde susmak suretiyle bu insanlık suçuna, bu vahşete maalesef ortak oluyor. Bu önemli günde şunu bir kez daha açık açık söylemek isterim. Ne yaparsa yapsın İsrail, er ya da geç durdurulacak. Lübnan'a kara harekatının sonuçları geçmişteki işgallerine benzemeyecektir. Savunmasız, izole, bütün dünyadan yalıtılmış bir Gazze savunması ile Lübnan'ın savunması aynı olmayacaktır. Birleşmiş Milletler başta olmak üzere tüm devlet ve uluslararası kuruluşlar daha fazla vakit kaybetmeden, daha fazla kadın, çocuk ölmeden İsrail'i durdurmalıdır.
Let's go over to the State House where there is a briefing on the attack in Israel.
Can you give us a sense for how U.S. officials are thinking about this right now? in terms of magnitude of a response? Will it be more severe than the U.S. response to the Iranian attack on Israel in April, given your...
So I think it's too early to get into what the response might be. As I said, we're just a couple hours after this event having occurred. It's important that all of us inside the United States be able to take stock of the attack, be able to take stock of what occurred. As I said, there are initial assessments, but we need time to collect all of the information, and we need time to talk with our Israeli counterparts, and we need time to talk to other partners in the region about the way forward. And we'll do that over the coming days. But it is clear that this was once again a significant escalation by Iran. When you see Iran launching attacks on another state, ultimately to come to the defense of a terrorist organization, it is an escalation, and Israel has the right to defend itself, but we will coordinate with them on what any response looks like.
How much more worried are you about a regional war today than you were in previous days before this attack occurred?
So I've gotten that question a number of times over the past year, and I never want to try and calibrate our level of concern, only to say, or other than to say that preventing the outbreak of a full-scale regional conflagration has been one of our priorities since October 7th. It's something that we immediately identified was a risk after Hamas launched its brutal attacks on Israel, and something that we have been working to prevent. There have been a number of times in the past 12 months where it looked like we might reach such a conflagration. April 13th is one of them, quite obviously. And the United States, through a combination of deterrence and diplomacy, has been able to prevent such an outbreak of full-scale war. And we will continue to try and prevent an outbreak of full-scale war in the days and weeks ahead.
Just a few more questions. Is Iran's nuclear program a legitimate target for an Israeli response?
Again, I don't want to get into, and this is not to to say that I'm ruling anything out and that I'm ruling anything in, but I would answer any question this way, which is, we want to have these conversations directly with our Israeli counterparts over the coming days. It's clear that this was an unacceptable attack, and as we made clear before this attack, there will be consequences for it, but I think it's appropriate that we discuss those consequences with our Israeli counterparts before we talk about them publicly.
Any other countries involved in defending Israel alongside the United States?
There were partners, as I said in my opening comments, who assisted in the defense of Israel. I will let all of those partners speak to their own actions.
And last question, is the attack over as far as the U.S. assessment is?
Certainly this initial wave of an attack is over, which is not to say that there are other waves coming, or that there, is not to say that there are other waves coming. We saw an initial attack earlier today against the state of Israel. Certainly it would be incredibly reckless and would continue to be escalatory were Iran to launch further attacks on Israel, and we'll be monitoring in the hours ahead.
There have been a lot of parallels drawn between Iran's attacks on Israel we saw in April and what happened today. The big difference is that back in the spring, Iran did message for weeks the kind of attack it was going to carry out against Israel, as opposed to this time around, it seemed to be very sudden by comparison. That lack of warning, public messaging, do you read into that? Is there any diplomatic significance?
I don't want to try to make assessments about why Iran made the decisions it made, or why it kind of telegraphed them publicly last time and didn't do so this time. Obviously, we had some indication that an attack might be in the works. You saw us talking about that. We made clear, we gave warnings to our Israeli counterparts about it earlier today, and I think they came and read out some of those conversations publicly. So we had indications that there may be some such attack. I can't speak to why they made the decision to not telegraph it as publicly as they did last time. It doesn't change the fundamental nature of the attacks, which is that this was an unacceptable and brazen action by the state of Iran.
I know you want to have conversations with your Israeli counterparts about what their response will be, but can you say anything about, are the discussions happening now? Have Israeli officials laid out any potential options for retaliation?
There are discussions that are ongoing. There were discussions that were happening between the United States and Israel as the attacks were unfolding. There were discussions that were happening from officials in this building, officials in the White House, and I won't speak to the Pentagon, but I would assume by officials at the Pentagon in the immediate aftermath of the attacks, just in the last couple of hours, and those conversations will continue through the rest of the day and, of course, in the days to come.
Thank you.
Matt, did the U.S. have any indication whether or not they were successful that the Iranians intended to strike U.S. interests or assets in the region?
I'm going to defer to the Pentagon to speak to specific operational details as to what the Iranians might have been targeting. They're obviously in the best position to monitor that and to speak to it. And I know they're having a briefing later today. I'll defer that question to them.
Okay, I mean, we understand that the embassy had all of its employees go home and shelter in place. Just want to confirm
that was out of an abundance of caution, knowing that an attack on Tel Aviv might be in the works, and so we took that step out of Tel Aviv and potentially Jerusalem as well. So we took that step out of an abundance of caution. But in terms of what specific sites Iran was targeting, I will defer to my colleagues at the Pentagon.
Okay. In terms of the partners that you mentioned were engaged this time, without getting into specifics as to who it was, were there fewer partners? Was there less support for their engagement this time around?
I think that's still specific. Maybe it's a generality. Either way, I'm just not going to get into it, other than say that there were partners that were engaged with us in this defense of Israel, and I will let every country speak to their own participation.
Okay, it's not a specific. It's just, I mean,
it's more specific than I'm willing to share at this point.
And just to clarify, I understand consultations are ongoing with the Israelis. What does the U.S. believe is the right course of action now? A response or diplomacy?
So again, I think it is important that we have those conversations with Israel before we read them out publicly. Obviously, we do not want to see this conflict continue to escalate. That said, we have been clear that there must be consequences for this attack, and I think it's important that we discuss this issue privately with our partners before we read them out publicly.
Okay, and in previous instances, it had become known that that part of the way, as you mentioned, the U.S. deterred Iran from taking action was through diplomacy, including the pushing of the potential of ceasefire talks, a potential breakthrough in Gaza. That seems remote now. What is the status of ceasefire talks, either in Gaza or in Lebanon, that the U.S. had been pushing in the weeks prior to these developments?
It's a really good question, and I will say, I went into some of this detail here yesterday. Where we are on the ceasefire talks in Gaza is that the terrorist group that Iran funds, Hamas, has been unwilling to come to the table to engage the past several weeks. So yes, it's true that we have not been able to advance these ceasefire talks, but it's not because of any lack of effort by the United States or our partners in the region. It's because the terrorist organization that Iran has sponsored for years and years and years has refused to come to the table. So if Iran wants to use the breakdown...
Let's cross now live to News Central's senior international correspondent, Adeshowa Josh. She joins us from Istanbul. Adeshowa, I don't know if you saw that presser moments ago, the deliberation on responses and fear about escalating the violence. What more can you tell us about this development?
Felicity, the last 24 hours has been super chaotic in the region. It began with the announcement by the IDF that Israel was invading Lebanon in the wee hours of Tuesday, and that it was coming through the northern borders, and then that sent ripples and shocks across the region, with leaders cautioning that this ground invasion is, in fact, another level in the escalation of the conflict that we have seen since October 7th last year, and then in the last 2 weeks, indeed. And then Hezbollah coming up to say that, well, there has been no intrusion into its own territory, in fact. And we saw that even though we heard that announcement by Israel, we didn't quite see any form of confrontation between Hezbollah fighters and the IDF. And just a couple of hours ago, just about half an hour ago before we came on air, we saw that Iran launched hundreds of ballistic missiles into Tel Aviv. As you can see it right on your screen, barreling down from the sky. Tel Aviv residents taking shelter, and the Israeli military telling people to take cover and go to the bunkers. This is a significant escalation indeed of this crisis.
Adeshowa, I know these are early hours yet, but is there anything you can tell us about? Sorry to interrupt. I know these early hours and the story is still developing. There's been no word about casualty. Do you maybe have an update on that?
There has been no word about casualty, actually. We're not sure whether any of the missiles that was launched actually hit any of the targeted sites. I'm looking at the feed right now, and I'm seeing that that indeed 3 Tel Aviv military bases were a target of the attack according to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. We are also hearing that Iran has grounded flights. There have been all of these updates. In fact, Biden and Harris are said to be in the Situation Room, but there has been nothing on casualty from the Israeli side. So we're going to have to wait for a couple more hours to know whether there has been any casualty indeed. Felicity.
What are the implications here? What is the implication of Iran's direct hit on Israel?
From Biden, President Biden of the United States, saying that the United States is ready to defend and to support Israel in terms of whatever kind of response it might want to go ahead with in responding to this attack. So we're going to likely see the United States coordinating its attacks, as you have heard from the spokesperson of the White House in that presser a couple of minutes ago. And then what happens then is you see response from other Western allies, even though a couple of hours ago, when Israel announced its ground invasion into Lebanon, we heard them condemn, some of them at least, Denmark and Spain, coming out outrightly to say that sort of ground invasion is unacceptable, and it just continues to escalate the issue that everyone is trying to get a ceasefire on. So what you will then see is how this situation that is supposed to have culminated in a ceasefire is then getting escalated by the minute. Iran said indeed that Israel should expect a very tough response if America supports Israel in its response to its attack. It's crazy. It's going to be a tit for tat in the coming days. Who knows how many more barrage of ballistic missiles that Iran has? Who knows how Israel is going to react? But experts have been saying this since the attack, since the war broke out 361 days ago. Everyone has been saying that what happened today is a culmination of what Israel was perhaps expecting to happen, an Iranian attack. That as soon as Iran attacks Israel, then we'll begin to see where this war is actually going. It's just 6 more days, I suppose, to October 7th, when it will be 1 year since the war in Gaza broke out. Felicity.
Quite an unfortunate development. We will be coming back to you for updates as this story develops. Thank you for speaking with us. That's all we'll wrap it up for now on Beyond the Continent. Do stay with News Central for further updates. In the meantime, you can share your thoughts. Join us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central TV live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, on Avo TV and on YouTube. As always, thank you for watching. I'll see you much later.